In the year 79 AD, beneath the roaring Colosseum of Rome, a young woman sat alone in darkness. Her wrists were raw from iron shackles, and her ears rang with the echo of 50,000 cheers above her. Cheers for the gladiator who had just murdered her brothers. Her name was Sabina. She was 19, captured, stripped of everything, waiting in a place few ever returned from. She wasn't the first. She wouldn't be the last. What unfolded next didn't just reveal a ritual. It exposed one of the most vicious, calculated, and systematized forms of sanctioned cruelty ever devised. A practice so disturbing that Roman historians debated whether to mention it at all, and when they did, they spoke in whispers or cloaked metaphors. Because what Rome engineered beneath its monuments wasn't just conquest, it was psychological warfare turned into public ritual. Rome didn't only perfect roads, aqueducts, and governance, it perfected suffering. In the grand story of ancient empires, few systems reveal more about how far power will go when accountability disappears. This is that story, not of war, not of politics, but of what happened after. After the crowds left, after the blood dried, after the applause faded. This was the moment Rome removed its mask and revealed how it truly ruled. Sabina wasn't just another victim, she was a symbol. Before her village was reduced to ashes, she'd been betrothed to a warrior named Disabilis. She was the daughter of a chieftain, trained in religious rites and raised with dignity. Her people, the Dions, had resisted Roman expansion for decades, but in 78 AD that resistance collapsed. General Marcus Antonius returned with gold, relics, and 847 captives. Among them, 124 noble women, not peasants, not farmers, women of stature, women meant to break the spirit of a conquered tribe. Rome had already won the war. What came next was about making sure that war stayed won forever. That's where the Colosseum came in. Built to overwhelm the senses, the arena was a marvel of engineering and intimidation. It wasn't just a place of entertainment, it was a tool, a pulsing, living monument to Roman dominance. Gladiator games weren't just fun, they were statecraft, a tool of ritualized propaganda where blood was a language. And on the afternoon Sabina was taken, it spoke clearly. This is what happens to those who resist. Her captor was Gaius Valerius Maximus, 6 feet tall, covered in scars, born into slavery, and now one of Rome's most celebrated fighters. He had survived 14 years of deadly combat, killed 89 men. He dreamed of one thing, the wooden sword that symbolized freedom, the Rudis. But dreams came slowly and death came quickly. He had just killed her brother. That day his reward wasn't just gold or fame, it was choice. After his victory, a bronze tablet was handed to him. On it, the list of spoils, wine, bed, gold, or something far darker, what Rome called Victoria Carnalis, the carnal privilege. This wasn't just tolerated, it was expected, it was celebrated. To Rome, the bodies of the conquered were simply part of the prize. Sabina's story didn't begin in chains, and that's what made it powerful. She had once stood in ceremonial robes beside her father, leading songs at the solstice. She had memorized the names of her ancestors, kept the stories of her tribe alive through chants passed down generations. Her role wasn't just symbolic, it was sacred. To see her paraded in the sands of Rome, stripped of name and dignity, was no accident. It was the point. Rome's conquest didn't end with borders. It needed to crush identity. And Sabina's identity, her connection to Dion's spiritual life, made her a high-value target in the empire's campaign of erasure. To Roman generals, turning women like her into footnotes was as essential as battlefield victory. Every public humiliation served a strategic purpose: memory disruption. The fewer survivors who could retell who they were, what they stood for, and what was taken, the less chance future generations would remember how to resist. Rome wanted silence, not just obedience, but Sabina's silence would not come easily. Every step she took in captivity was layered with the weight of who she had once been. And even in the heart of her oppression, she remained something the empire could never fully claim, a living reminder of what it had destroyed. In a separate chamber, Sabina and 17 other women waited. They had been washed, stripped of any remaining signs of status, dressed in plain tunics, their hair combed, not for their comfort, but for evaluation. Guards marked notes on wax tablets, moving between them like appraisers of livestock. An older priestess whispered something that cut the silence. "They're preparing us, not for life, for spectacle." Sabina's name was on that list. At exactly 3 p.m., as the sun lowered and the shadow of the Colosseum grew longer, the underground engine began to move. Wooden elevators operated by slaves began lifting prisoners into the blinding light of the arena. What the audience saw wasn't random cruelty, it was orchestrated theater. 20 Dion women emerged into the blinding heat. Above them, the wealthy cheered, the vendors sold roasted meat and cheap wine, and beneath their feet, dried blood cracked under the sun. Each woman was paired off, each handed a wooden sword, and each told, "Fight, not for survival, but for amusement." The rules were simple: fight each other. The winners would become property of Rome's champions. The losers would die. Sabina stood across from a woman named Kamasikas, her friend's sister, the one who once braided her hair before her engagement. Now they stood like animals in a ring. The crowd wanted a show, but the women stood still. 1 minute passed, then another. The audience grew restless. Olive pits rained from the seats. Still, they didn't raise their swords. This wasn't cowardice. It was the only act of resistance left. Then the guards moved in. Kamaskas was struck across the back and collapsed. Sabina screamed. They were dragged away, not to execution, but to what Rome called private allocation. And what came next was worse. Below the arena, the noise faded into something more terrifying: silence. The corridors narrowed, the air thickened, and the smell of iron replaced sunlight. Torches flickered against stone walls scarred with marks left by hands that had clawed and begged long before this day. Doors opened one by one, each leading to rooms too small to pace in, too orderly to mistake for chance. Everything had its place: the rings in the walls, the benches worn smooth by waiting, the locks designed so only one side ever held power. No speeches followed, no ceremony. The spectacle was over, and the audience had already moved on to food, laughter, and gossip. What remained was procedure: names reduced to entries, bodies reassigned, resistance reclassified as inconvenience. Somewhere above, music played. Somewhere below, lives were sorted into outcomes no one would ever announce aloud. And in that quiet, Rome revealed its truest face. Not loud, not chaotic, but calm, efficient, and terrifyingly prepared. Beneath the arena, in the bowels of the Hypogeum, there were rooms designed not for combat, but for control. Small, cold, stone walls embedded with iron rings, doors that locked only from the outside, every inch crafted with intent. These were the allocation chambers, built into the Colosseum's original blueprints. Gas Valerius entered one such room at 4 p.m. Sabina stood in the corner. Her hands shook. He stood in full armor, blood still streaked across his chest. And for a moment, both froze. Two strangers, both broken in different ways, staring across a divide of law, pain, and power. He had the right to do anything. She had the right to nothing. But then something happened that no record expected. He sat down, removed his helmet, and whispered in broken Dion, "What was his name?" Sabina answered, "Disabilis." Gas nodded. "I killed a Dialis today. Might have been him." They talked for hours. She told him about her village, her family. He told her about his father, executed for unpaid debts, about growing up with nothing, about learning to fight because not fighting meant death. And when the guards returned, they assumed the worst. But Gas made a decision. He stood, told the guards she was infected, demanded she be sent to the infirmary. It was the only legal loophole. Once a captive was labeled diseased, she couldn't be claimed. The guards knew it was a lie. Everyone did. But challenging a gladiator's claim required paperwork, and nobody wanted paperwork. Sabina was removed, not to freedom, just to a different kind of cell. She died 3 days later, a simple infection, the same infection that killed more prisoners than swords ever could. Her death wasn't recorded, no senator debated it, no historian cared. But Gas never forgot. He fought again, twice more. He won, and refused the reward both times. In the gladiator barracks, the rumors spread fast. Maximus had gone soft. Maximus had joined a cult. Maximus had been cursed by Dion witches. But the truth was quieter. He had remembered what it felt like to be human. Rome didn't like that. And when a young gladiator, the nephew of Senator Quintus Aurelius, refused his reward after a match, citing Maximus as his inspiration, the Senate had no choice. The debate moved from whispers to scrolls, from rumor to record. But behind closed doors, the conversations turned darker. Some senators whispered about making an example of Maximus. Quiet removal, staged accident, maybe a message to other gladiators who thought of following his path. Others feared he had already inspired too many. Within weeks, arena handlers reported more refusals. Not many, but enough. Enough to make commanders nervous. Barrack scribes noted new formations, fighters clustering, avoiding certain rewards. A quiet defiance was spreading. Not a revolution, but a crack, one that could widen. A retired champion from Hispania spoke openly about his shame. Another in Carthage broke protocol and released a captiva before fleeing the city. Some patrons, the ones who had always used their wealth to orchestrate the shows, began to worry about appearances. A few demanded cleaner games. The Senate's control relied on illusion, the illusion of honor, order, and inevitability. But Maximus had torn that veil just slightly, and now they couldn't unsee it. On October 1st, 79 AD, the Senate passed the Lex Captivitae, the law of captive women. It banned the public distribution of female war prisoners in the arena. It outlawed their humiliation as part of games. Private exploitation still happened, but Rome didn't want it in front of crowds anymore. Not because it cared, but because it was bad optics. The arena continued. The crowds cheered, but the worst acts disappeared from the stage, at least for a while. 3 months later, Gas Valerius Maximus earned his freedom, not for his compassion, but for surviving 5 more fights. His final act as a free man was purchasing the freedom of a woman named Camacicus. The records say nothing more, but historians believe it was her, the woman who stood beside Sabina on the sand, the one who chose not to raise her sword. This story isn't just about Rome, it's about how power erodes empathy, about how cruelty becomes custom when no one asks questions, and how systems don't need villains, just routine. Because what made this horror possible wasn't just one man's choices, it was architecture, bureaucracy, applause. It was the cheering crowd. Rome didn't just conquer lands, it conquered memory, language, even the right to tell your own story. And for every Sabina, whose name we barely know, there were thousands more. Disappeared into paperwork, reduced to numbers, to rewards. But in what a civilization tries hardest to hide. Subscribe to never miss a story that history tried to bury. Comment below, what disturbed you most, the cruelty, or how efficient it all became? Share this because remembering matters.